News on television reported that the second princess of the Vermilion Kingdom, Stella, had arrived in Japan. She was accepted into Hagoon Knight Academy in Tokyo with the highest score in history and was even called the most talented and strongest knight. Ikki, who was watching the news, quickly turned off the TV. He thought about how some people believe life was unfair because what someone was born with could decide their future. Talent or no talent was something set from birth, and it felt like unchangeable fate. Those without talent would never defeat those who had it, so in the end, they had no choice but to give up on their dreams. Ikki remembered the words of his great-grandfather Ryuma, who had told him not to be bitter when he realized his own weakness. That advice was proof that Ikki had not given up on his dream. Holding on to those words, Ikki summoned his sword in Tetsu. He was a blazer, a special kind of human able to summon weapons formed from their very soul and use supernatural techniques through magic. Blazers recognized by the international organization were given the title of Mage Knight. Ikki's dream was to become one of them. After training within Tetsu, Ikki returned to his room only to find Stella there wearing nothing but light clothing. Shocked, he froze for a moment. Stella, equally surprised, became furious when she saw him. In his panic, Ikki clumsily tried to make things even, which only made the situation worse. Stella, angry and embarrassed, immediately slapped him. Because of that incident, Ikki was summoned by Kurono, the headmistress of Hagoon Academy. She explained that Hagoon had always been the most prestigious knight academy in Japan. Every year in the Seven-Star Festival had decided the strongest knight, Hagoon's representatives had almost always taken the championship. But lately, the academy's results had declined. That was why she had stepped in as headmistress, determined to restore Hagoon's glory. However, she had not expected Ikki to get involved in such an inappropriate misunderstanding. Ikki explained that it was just an accident. Kurono, though skeptical, questioned why he had reacted the way he did. Ikki admitted his behavior had been clumsy, but he tried to take responsibility by apologizing directly to Stella. He promised he would do whatever it took to make up for the mistake. Stella, still upset, initially wanted to spread the story, but after hearing Ikki's promise, she decided to forgive him only if he was willing to face the consequences. She teased him with an impossible demand, but Ikki refused, saying the accident was not worth such a punishment. Stella became more offended when Ikki downplayed the situation, and her anger flared. She called him a lowly commoner and threatened to unleash her power against him. Flames appeared around her as her fury grew. Ikki, frightened, desperately tried to calm her down. Stella accused him of violating her dignity by barging into her room and looking at her in a disrespectful way. Cornered, Ikki blurted out that he had looked at her because he was genuinely captivated by her beauty. Hearing his honest words, Stella was caught off guard. The flames around her fizzled out and she blushed in embarrassment. She wondered how Ikki could casually say such a thing. Ikki, meanwhile, insisted that the room was actually his own. Stella did not believe him until Kurono returned and clarified that from now on, they would be sharing a room. Both Ikki and Stella were shocked. Aki questioned why an A-rank student like Stella had to share a room with him, a Class F student. He admitted that the techniques he could use were limited to low-level physical enhancements, and his magic power was average at best. In other areas, his ability was at the lowest level in the academy. Kurono explained that this was why Ikki was nicknamed the worst one, the weakest student in Hagoon. The reason he and Stella were paired together was simple. There was no student weaker than Ikki, and no student stronger than Stella. Stella asked what would happen if more misunderstandings came up between them. Kurono pointed out that Hagoon had other cases of male and female students sharing rooms, so if they could not accept it, they were free to leave the academy. Stella reluctantly agreed to the arrangement but set 3 strict rules for Ikki. He was not allowed to talk to her, look at her, or even breathe near her. Ikki was dumbfounded, especially by the last rule, but Stella explained she did not want him invading her personal space. She even said he could sleep outside the room if necessary, which led to more bickering between the two. To settle things, Kurono reminded them that knights solved conflicts with their swords. She proposed a sparring match where the winner would decide the room's rules. Akai thought it was a fair and reasonable idea, but Stella was certain that a failing student from Class F could never beat her. Ikki, however, believed that anything could happen in a match, especially since he had trained tirelessly up to this point. Stella agreed to the duel, but she raised the stakes. The loser would have to serve the winner. Aki protested that it was going too far, and eventually they reached an agreement. Kurono declared that the duel would take place in 1 hour. Stella really could not understand why she had to face Ikki, who claimed he had worked so hard. She remembered how her mother once told her not to train too much, but little Stella had said that her small country needed a powerful magic knight, and she promised to control her strength. Stella was very confident that she could defeat Ikki in the match. As Stella walked toward the arena, the students around her were talking about it. They were surprised that the great Stella was about to fight the one known as the worst one. Kurono herself did not expect Ikki to finally agree to the duel. Ikki's goal was to win the 7-star festival because if he could win it, he would be able to graduate even with poor grades, just as Kurono had once explained to him. Ikki was certain Stella would also join the festival, which meant sooner or later he would have to face her. Kagami, a member of the school's magazine club, even showed up to take photos. When Stella entered the arena, she mentioned that she knew Ikki was not allowed to join sparring classes because his ability was below the minimum standard. She advised him to stop dreaming of becoming a magic knight. Even though Stella's words had some truth to them, Ikki refused to back down from the match. He believed that hard work could surpass talent. Those words reminded Stella of someone she had defeated in the past, someone who claimed that being beaten by a gifted person meant effort did not matter, something Stella strongly disagreed with. The match was about to begin, and Kurono explained that the purpose of training battles was not to hurt opponents but to fight until the other could no longer continue. The devices used were set in training mode. As soon as the battle began, Ikki summoned his sword in Tetsu, while Stella brought out her blazing weapon, Levitin. Both of them charged at each other. Stella explained that the fire from her sword burned at 3,000 degrees Celsius, and if it hit, the risk was life-threatening. She swung her sword toward Ikki, but he quickly dodged. Even Nene, who was watching, was surprised by the intensity of the duel. Throughout the match, Stella kept attacking, but she did not expect Ikki to block her strikes so consistently. She praised his defensive technique. Ikki admitted he was struggling and pointed out that her swordsmanship showed she was not only gifted, but also someone who had worked hard. Stella appreciated his observation but was certain that her techniques could not be read so easily. At that moment, Ikki stopped one of her attacks. Stella was shocked to see that he could mimic her movement after observing it only once. The truth was that nobody had ever trained Ikki, so he had taught himself by carefully analyzing others. By studying deeply, he believed he could understand techniques to their very core and eventually surpass them. That was Ikki's style of swordsmanship. Stella attempted to feint, but Ikki calmly said that her swing was too slow and he easily blocked it. He even recognized that the move was not part of her usual sword style and advised she should not rely on tricks. His counterstrike landed, and for a moment, the students thought the fight was already over. Stella stood back up, however, and this time she poured her magic into her weapon. She explained that she knew Ikki's Intetsu would not be able to hurt her unless she fought him with her sword. Stella admitted that if she fought Ikki using only her swordsmanship, everyone would realize she was not just talented but also trained with dedication. Still, she decided to acknowledge that if she won, it would be because of her magic. With that, she resolved to face Ikki with her full power. Ikki, who had long accepted that he lacked natural talent as a magic knight, refused to step back. Stella then unleashed her full power, Cafeteria Salamandra. Ikki, meanwhile, focused on his own secret technique, always thinking about how the weak could defeat the strong. He called it Itoshura. When Stella launched her strike at him, Ikki suddenly moved with blinding speed, dodging the attack. Stella was stunned by how fast he had become, as if his magic had spiked all at once. In truth, Ikki had poured all of his magic into a single burst, focusing every drop of his energy into 1 minute. That was his original noble art. With that, Ikki's blade reached Stella, knocking her down. His belief was simple. To overcome the strong, the weak had to push themselves beyond human limits. Soon after, Ikki himself collapsed from exhaustion. Kurono then announced that Ikki had won the match. The entire audience was left in shock. Nene, watching with a smile, commented that the upcoming selection tournament was definitely going to be exciting. After Stella regained consciousness, Kurono came to see her in the student infirmary. Stella admitted that it had been a long time since she had felt the sting of defeat. She asked how Ikki was doing. Kurono explained that the technique of releasing all energy within a single minute could only be used once a day, which meant Ikki must have been far more exhausted than Stella. Curious, Stella asked what had actually happened. A student like Ikki should not have been ranked at level F. Kurono explained that rankings were determined only by a blazer's raw ability scores, so skills like swordsmanship or martial arts were not considered in the evaluation. Because of that, the system at the time did not favor Ikki's strengths. Stella was still puzzled about how Ikki could end up repeating a year. Kurono told her that there were many difficulties, or rather, the kind of simple but unfair problems that often showed up. Ikki had faced that unfair system over and over, but he never gave up and continued to train his abilities with conviction. Earlier, Stella had once said that she wanted to study abroad because staying in her home country would not help her grow. Because of that, Kurono suggested that she follow Ikki's example so her time in school would not be wasted. Later, Stella returned to the room and saw Ikki fast asleep. She gently touched his back. It was the first time she had ever touched a boy's back. Suddenly, Ikki shifted in his sleep and his body pressed down on Stella's hand. She carefully tried to pull her hand away, holding herself back from making any noise. As she noticed Ikki's shirt slightly open at the stomach, a brief thought crossed her mind to reach out, but she quickly held herself back. Remembering how Ikki had once seen her in an embarrassing situation, she wanted to even the score, so she lightly placed her hand on his stomach. The moment she touched him, Stella felt a strong surge of energy flowing from him. Surprised, she muttered to herself why she had even done that in the first place. To her shock, Ikki suddenly woke up and asked what she was doing. Startled, Stella screamed in embarrassment. After that, Stella sincerely apologized to Ikki. She admitted that she had judged him too quickly, and that if she had tried to understand him beforehand, she probably would not have lost the way she did. She openly acknowledged her defeat. Ikki then asked if Stella was now ready to fulfill their agreement, since the loser had to follow the winner's orders. Stella had no choice because she did not want to break her word. With frustration, she said that she would follow any order from Ikki. Ikki, amused by her expression, laughed. To Stella's surprise, Ikki's order was nothing more than asking her to become his roommate because he wanted to be closer to her. Stella's face turned bright red when she heard such a straightforward request. Ikki told her he would cancel the arrangement if she was uncomfortable with it, but Stella quickly stopped him. She said she would go along with it, insisting that she was only carrying out his order. Still flustered, Stella asked Ikki to call her by her real name. From that moment, the two of them agreed to be good friends. Shizuku was Ikki's younger sister. One day, she realized that even in their peaceful world, there was still a cruel fate. Ikki, the brother she loved so much, suffered because of it. No one in their family cared about him. One morning, Ikki and Stella were out jogging together. For Ikki, running 20 kilometers every morning was just part of his routine. He told Stella not to push herself too hard, but Stella said she was fine with it. Ikki reminded her that her magical powers were already more than enough to make up for her stamina, but Stella insisted that she could keep up. Ikki pointed out that she just didn't like losing. Ikki offered her a drink from his bottle, but Stella hesitated, feeling a little embarrassed. Ikki quickly apologized, thinking she didn't want to drink from his bottle. But to his surprise, Stella snatched it and drank anyway. Seeing that, Ikki looked genuinely happy. That same day, his little sister Shizuku would be starting at the academy. They hadn't seen each other in 4 years. Stella wondered if Shizuku was actually his stepsister, but Ikki explained that they were true siblings by blood. Stella felt relieved when she heard that. Later, Yuri, who was Ikki and Stella's homeroom teacher, introduced herself to the class. She explained the selection process for the upcoming 7 Stars Festival. Stella noticed Yuri's voice sounded weak, but Ikki reassured her that even though Yuri seemed frail, she was a good teacher. The principal had announced during the opening ceremony that unlike in the past when representatives were chosen based on grades, this year, the selection would be through a tournament. The top 6 students would qualify as representatives. The rules were simple and fair. The tournament would begin the following week, and schedules as well as opponents would be sent to students by email through their ID cards. Stella asked how many matches they need to fight. Yuri said each student would have about 10 matches, which meant 1 match every 3 days. Ikki thought that would give him enough time to use his ability, Itershura. Yuri also explained that anyone who didn't want to participate could withdraw since it wouldn't affect their grades. She encouraged the class, raising her voice in cheer, but suddenly collapsed and coughed up blood. Ikki and Stella immediately rushed her to the student infirmary. Yuri revealed that she had been coughing up nearly a liter of blood every day. Ikki gently told her not to push herself so hard, but Yuri insisted that the day was special and she didn't want to look weak. Ikki confided to Stella that the only reason he was admitted into the academy was because Yuri had given him the chance. Yuri, however, said it was because of Ikki's own strength. She smiled and mentioned that last year had been especially tough for him. When Stella and Ikki left the infirmary, Stella asked what Yuri had meant. Ikki explained that Yuri was talking about how he wasn't allowed to join regular classes before. In the past, there had been no minimum requirements, but things had changed since then. Just then, the girl ran up and hugged Ikki. Stella was shocked and scolded him, but Ikki insisted he didn't know her. The girl introduced herself as Kagami, one of Ikki's juniors, and said she was a huge fan of his. Stella was clearly annoyed. Kagami praised Ikki for how strong he had looked in a recent match. She said she planned to start a newspaper club and wanted to feature him in the first issue, asking if he'd agree to an interview. Ikki looked embarrassed and said he wasn't really that impressive. Stella, irritated, said Ikki had already become popular at the start of the semester, so he might as well accept the interview. After that, she walked away. Kagami happily said she already had a headline idea for his article. Ikki asked her to talk about it later. Ikki then ran after Stella. On the way, he spotted Shizuku. She came over and greeted him warmly. Other students recognized her as the second-ranked student in the academy. Ikki admitted he almost didn't recognize her after so long, and he apologized for making her wait. Shizuku said she had been looking forward to meeting him again. and in front of everyone, she suddenly kissed him. Stella was stunned, and Kagami quickly took a picture, planning to use it as news material. Afterwards, Shizuku said she had wanted to see him for years. Stella, visibly upset, demanded to know what Ikki was doing, but Ikki was at a loss for words. Shizuku explained that kissing was simply a way of showing affection, usually between couples, but she believed that siblings who shared a deep bond could also express it. She added that in some countries, a kiss was considered no different from a greeting. Stella shouted in frustration that in her country, siblings would never do such a thing. Kagami chimed in, saying that in some other countries, it actually was normal. Ignoring the argument, Shizuku explained that she just missed Ikki deeply after 4 years apart. Ikki, however, reminded her not to say things that could be misunderstood. Shizuku leaned in as if to kiss him again, but Stella quickly pulled him back. She was confused as to why Ikki wasn't stopping her himself. Shizuku then asked why Princess Stella was interfering with a private moment between siblings. Stella and Shizuku kept arguing about the matter until Shizuku finally asked what kind of relationship Stella had with Ikki. Stella claimed that Ikki was her master, and that she was his servant. The students around them were shocked to hear that, while Kagami became overly excited about the scandal that would surely make it into her school newspaper. Shigen already had a catchy headline prepared for the story. Ikki immediately denied Stella's claim, but Stella insisted. She explained that after Ikki won their sparring match, he gave her an order like sharing the same bed with him. Hearing that, Shizuku turned to Ikki and asked if it was true. Ikki didn't deny it, since he and Stella really did sleep in the same bunk bed. Shizuku then declared that she would free Ikki and summoned her weapon, Yoi Shiger. Ikki tried to stop her, but Shizuku calmly said that she was confident she could defeat Stella since her element was water, while Stella's was fire. Ikki reminded her not to use a device in that place, but before he could say more, Stella accepted the challenge and activated her weapon, Leviatine. Ikki was frustrated that Stella was going along with it, but Stella fired back, mocking Shizuku's device as being too simple, just like her chest. Shizuku refused to back down and retorted that Stella's chest and her weapon were both flashy but lacked substance. The two of them exchanged insults until they finally launched attacks at each other. Because of this reckless behavior, they were punished by being forced to clean the school toilets. Normally, using a device either inside or outside the school was strictly prohibited unless permission was granted. Kurono explained that under normal circumstances they should have been suspended, but since it was only the first day, they would instead be punished with 1 week of clean toilets. Both Stella and Shizuku promised not to repeat their mistake. They were only allowed to go home after finishing the cleaning, and since there were 27 women's toilets in total, it took them a long time. Even while scrubbing, the two of them continued trading snide remarks. Shizuku told Stella to stay away from Ikki, but Stella flatly refused. She said it was impossible for her to stay away from Ikki since they shared a room. Shizuku insisted that Ikki would always belong to her, no matter what Stella tried to do. Stella countered by bringing up the fact that Shizuku had kissed Ikki on the lips. Shizuku defended herself, saying that there were things only siblings could truly understand, and that Stella would never be able to feel what Ikki felt. She explained that Stella could never understand Ikki's pain of being treated like he did not exist. Stella was left shocked and confused by Shizuku's words. Shizuku then left, telling Stella there was nothing she could do. When Shizuku returned to her dorm room, she was greeted by her roommate, Nagi. Meanwhile, Stella was still troubled by Shizuku's words. Not long after, Ikki entered the room and asked what she was doing there. Stella said she had been waiting for him because she wanted to train together. Ikki assumed Stella was too tired to practice, but Stella handed him a bottle of water that he had left behind. Then Stella suddenly asked Ikki if he had really been treated as if he did not exist. Ikki was startled by the question and accidentally spat out the water he was drinking. He guessed Shizuku must have told her and admitted that he had wanted to share that story with Stella anyway. Ikki explained that he once looked up to someone named Ryuma, his great-grandfather, who was a national hero that led Japan and won a past war. The Kurogen family produced talented blazers in every generation, but not him. Because of this, his family treated him like he was nothing. He was never even invited to family gatherings. One New Year's Day, Ikki could no longer take it and left the house. The weather turned bad, and he became lost. For a moment, he was ready to give up on life, but then he realized how pathetic it would be to end like that. At that moment, Ryuma appeared before him. Ryuma understood Ikki's pain and told him to hold on to his frustration, because it was proof that he hadn't given up on his dreams. He reminded Ikki not to become the kind of man who gave up just because life was unfair. Ryuma said that humans were beings without wings, but they could still reach the moon. Those words truly saved Ikki. From then on, Ikki resolved to be like Ryuma. He wanted to someday meet someone who had suffered like him and pass on those same words. But in order to do that, he had to grow stronger, strong enough to be a true knight like Ryuma. Since no one was willing to train him, Ikki trained himself. Thinking back on it, he realized the Kurogane family never wanted failure like him to become a knight, so they pressured the school to impose a minimum ability requirement for classes. This became a rule under the former principal, specifically to stop Ikki from ever graduating from the academy. Luckily, Corona replaced the principal, though Ikki still believed the unfair treatment would continue. Stella, however, was certain that Ikki would never give up, no matter how much he suffered. She admitted that she had once felt the same way as well. Stella then asked Ikki to correct what he had said that morning when he claimed Stella hated to lose. Ikki nodded and changed his words, saying that neither of them wanted to lose. Hearing this, Stella smiled warmly at him. Meanwhile, Shizuku shared her thoughts with Nagi. She told him how much she cherished her older brother because of his kindness. Even after Ikki ran away, her feelings toward him remained the same. Shizuku realized how harshly her family had treated Ikki, so she decided to give him the affection he deserved directly from her. Hearing this, Medi smiled warmly. Shizuku apologized for talking too much even though she had just met Nagi. Nagi noticed that Shizuku was a shy person who disliked being around others, and he realized her family situation had only made things worse. Nagi admitted that he had once met someone similar to Shizuku. He reassured her that he didn't mind listening to her stories and even hoped she could see him as an older brother. Shizuku smiled at his kindness. That evening, Stella was preparing dinner while Ikki was taking a bath. Without warning, Stella entered the bathroom, which surprised Ikki since she was dressed in only her undergarments. Embarrassed, Ikki asked why she came in like that. With hesitation, Stella explained that she wanted to help wash his back because she considered herself someone who should support him, and she thought of it as her responsibility. Ikki tried to refuse, saying he never asked for such a thing, but Stella insisted. She began helping him wash, and Ikki's face turned red as he tried to stay composed, especially since she was sitting so close. Stella then asked if Ikki liked women's bodies, catching him off guard. She mentioned that she had noticed his flustered reaction earlier when Kagami had accidentally bumped into him, and she also realized that Ikki had been sneaking glances at her. Feeling guilty, Ikki apologized and admitted with a red face that he did feel attracted. Instead of being upset, Stella teased him, closing the distance between them, which left Ikki even more nervous. However, in the middle of this, an awkward accident happened. Her eye strap came loose. Stella only realized it after it slipped, and when she noticed how close she was to Ikki, she became overwhelmed with embarrassment. As Ikki turned his head toward her, Stella panicked and scolded him. When Ikki saw the fallen bra on the floor, he froze, realizing what had happened. Stella's face burned with embarrassment, and in her flustered state, she lashed out by slapping his cheek before shouting in frustration. That day, Ikki and Stella were training together, crossing swords to sharpen their skills. Afterward, they took a break and started talking. Stella mentioned that she had received an email from the academy, and her opponent would be Momotani from the third-year class. Ikki admitted that he had seen Momotani fight before, and the device he used was a rather unusual armor. Stella asked Ikki not to tell her anything about it, since she was the type who disliked looking up information on her opponents. She wanted to treat it as practice, in case she ever faced an unfamiliar blazer. Ikki agreed, since there were times when not knowing an opponent's level of skill was part of the challenge. Stella then said that researching an opponent's strength, as Ikki often did, was also important. Suddenly, Ikki smiled. He was surprised that even though he and Stella often disagreed, they still managed to get along well. Stella's face turned red, and she felt really embarrassed after Ikki said that. When the bell rang, Ikki invited Stella to head back to class. Stella, looking nervous, shyly asked Ikki out on a date. But before he could answer, Ikki's phone buzzed with a message from Shizuku, inviting him to go shopping the next day. Stella looked annoyed, especially since Ikki immediately agreed to Shizuku's invitation. The next day, Stella tagged along when Ikki went shopping with Shizuku. Shizuku did not expect someone like Princess Stella to go shopping with commoners. It turned out that Shizuku had also invited Nagi. Stella explained that it was Ikki who invited her after she had said she wanted to learn more about Japan. Shizuku pointed out that Stella should focus more on learning proper manners and how to read the situation. Not wanting to lose, Stella countered that she did come along after reading the situation, since she would not let Ikki go off with his flirty little sister. Nagi then introduced himself as Shizuku's roommate, saying that Shizuku had asked him to keep her company while shopping. Ikki found Nagi's appearance surprising. Nagi explained that while he was a man by nature, his heart was more like that of a woman. As Ikki and Nagi talked, Stella and Shizuku kept watching them. They seemed worried that Nagi and Ikki might get too close. Nagi even thought about teasing Ikki a little, but Shizuku quickly pointed her sword at him, putting a stop to it. That day, the group took a train and headed to the shopping district. Stella was happy to be there. At one point, Iki asked if Shizuku's outfit looked a bit too flashy. Shizuku admitted that it was Nagi who had dressed her up. When Stella saw Iki and Shizuku holding hands, she scolded them. Shizuku was confused, saying that it was nothing more than sibling contact. She reminded Stella that she and Iki used to walk holding hands all the time when they were younger. Stella secretly wished she could hold Iki's hand too, but Shizuku teased her, saying that if someone held hands with the opposite sex who was not family, it looked like she had special feelings for him. Stella's face turned bright red and she quickly denied it, saying she was only Iki's servant. Shizuku told her that she did not need to hold Iki's hand anyway, and then invited Iki to go eat with her. Stella grew furious, calling Iki both clueless and a siskan. Meanwhile, in the mall's security control room, guards were about to change shifts when something suspicious happened. At the same time, Iki and the others were eating ice cream at a cafe that Nagi had recommended. Stella was surprised that Nagi knew so much about good spots. Shizuku explained that Nagi was very knowledgeable about fashionable clothes and good food. Aki wiped some cream off Shizuku's face so her nice outfit would not get stained, and he tasted it without thinking much. Shizuku's face turned red and she was left speechless. Nagi realized that while Shizuku could act bold, her defenses were surprisingly weak. Shizuku admitted she had been caught off guard because Iki did it so suddenly. Unexpectedly, Stella smeared her face with cream and showed it to Iki, clearly wanting him to wipe it off like he had done for Shizuku. But since she had smeared too much, Iki went off to get a towel instead. Shizuku called Stella an idiot, and Nagi laughed, finding Stella's silly side rather cute. Back in the control room, an intruder entered and took out the security guards. At that moment, Iki and Nagi happened to be in the restroom. Iki was surprised to see Shizuku opening up to Nagi, since she was usually shy, easily irritated, and not good at dealing with strangers, especially men. Iki was grateful to Nagi for being friends with her. Nagi replied that Iki was exactly as Shizuku had described him, strong and caring. Suddenly, Nagi heard footsteps and covered Iki's mouth to keep him quiet. Two intruders working for Bishu burst into the restroom, with one of them even firing a gunshot. After making sure no one was inside, they left. Thanks to Nagi's magic, both he and Iki managed to stay hidden. Afterward, they returned to the restroom and found a mask left behind by the two criminals. Iki suspected that the mall they were in was being robbed. Nagi suggested they find out more, activating his device called Darkness Hermit. With it, Nagi could manipulate shadows and move through them. Together, he and Iki made their way to the security room, where they found the unconscious guards, most likely drugged by the intruders. Iki immediately reported the situation to Kurono. By then, the case had already made the news since a visitor had managed to escape and notify the police. Kurono told him that the police were surrounding the area. Iki wondered who the culprits really were. According to Kurono, it was just a gang of criminals with one blazer among them. They were also demanding a huge ransom. Akai thought that if money was all they were after, the case should have been easy to handle. According to Kurono, it seemed that the criminals were not only after money. She was certain the police would need the help of Iki and Nagi, so she allowed them to use their devices. Akai thanked her, and Kurono reminded him not to act recklessly. At that time, the criminals were holding several people hostage in the mall, including Shizuku and Stella. Stella called them cowards for targeting women and children. Shizuku whispered a plan to Stella and asked her not to act until she had finished preparing. In the crowd, a mother was crying and begging the criminals not to hurt her child. The one leading them, Yoken, shoved the woman to the ground. A young boy threw his ice cream at Yoken, asking him to leave his mother alone. Yoken insulted the boy and pushed him away before pointing a gun at him. Just as he pulled the trigger, Stella moved quickly. She used her flames to melt the bullet before it could reach the boy. Yoken fired several more times, but the shots had no effect against Stella's Empress dress. Stella calmly explained that she had no intention of fighting them and only wanted to speak to their leader. Yoken ignored her and kept firing until another man stepped forward. The man was Bisho, their boss. He ordered Yoken to lower his weapon. Bisho immediately recognized Stella as the second princess of the Vermilion Kingdom. He greeted her politely and even scolded Yoken for threatening the hostages. Yoken apologized but tried to justify himself by saying the boy had attacked him with ice cream. Bisho coldly remarked that the boy's behavior was the fault of his parents. Then, to everyone's shock, he pointed his gun at the boy's mother, claiming she had committed the crime of failing to teach her son proper manners. Stella's patience snapped. She activated her device, realizing too late that Bisho had been trying to provoke her from the start. Still, she had no choice but to fight. Bisho drew his own device, the Judgment Ring, and blocked her flames. With a single counter, he managed to knock Stella down. He explained that his weapon worked through a system of judgment and punishment. The ring on his left hand absorbed his opponent's attacks as sins, while the ring on his right hand released them back with multiplied force as punishment. Stella quickly realized she had been struck by her own power reflected against her. Bishu mocked her, calling her noble for risking her life to protect strangers. Then, with a twisted laugh, he demanded that Stella humble herself before him if she wanted to save the hostages. Stella refused to give up, and Bishu burst into loud laughter at his own cruelty. Ikki, furious, wanted to rush in, but Nagi stopped him. Nagi reminded him that acting recklessly could put everyone in greater danger. Meanwhile, Stella's resolve hardened, and though Bishu thought he had broken her, she stood strong. At the same time, Shizuku was secretly casting a spell. Nagi reassured Ikki, telling him to trust his sister, since she was one of the Academy's best magic users. Sure enough, Shizuku managed to quietly create a barrier around the hostages, keeping them safe without the criminals realizing it. Bishu eventually noticed that Stella wasn't the only blazer present. He ordered his men to open fire on everyone. Yokin and the others obeyed, but their bullets bounced harmlessly off Shizuku's magical shield. Confident now, Shizuku believed Ikki would finish the fight. Ikki drew his device in Tetsu. Bishu and his men spotted him standing above them and tried to shoot him down, but none of their bullets could hit him. Ikki declared Itoshura, focusing all of his strength into his sword. He knew that if Bishu's left hand made contact first, his attack would be neutralized, so Ikki moved with precision, leaping into the air and spinning to confuse Bishu's aim. In an instant, Ikki closed the distance and slashed with lightning speed. Bishu's left hand was severed by the strike. This was Ikki's seventh secret technique, Reiko. Bishu screamed in pain. Ikki explained that his sword was faster than Bishu's eyes could follow, leaving him unable to defend. He added that Bishu's suffering was nothing compared to what Stella had endured because of him. Not long after, Nagi revealed himself. Bishu desperately tried to order his subordinates to attack again, but it was already too late. Stella had already defeated them. Ikki suddenly hugged Stella and her face turned red from the unexpected embrace. He quickly apologized, and not long after, Shizuku arrived, bringing Stella a change of clothes. She was surprised that Stella had charged forward without a plan, but she admitted that Stella's actions were still something to be praised. Stella, in turn, complimented Shizuku for protecting everyone. Just then, Ikki's strength weakened and the others grew worried. He explained that it was the side effect of Itoshura. Out of nowhere, a woman who had been hiding among the crowd of hostages revealed herself as one of Bishu's subordinates and took control of the situation. She demanded that they release Bishu. Before anyone could act, a sudden attack knocked the woman down. Stella couldn't understand where the strike had come from. A man appeared, saying he hadn't intended to steal someone else's moment of effort. Nagi was confused because he hadn't sensed this man's presence at all. Ikki, however, recognized him right away. His name was Shizuya. With a confident smile, Shizuya remarked that he didn't expect Ikki to still be attending school. Soon after, the police arrived and arrested Bishu and the others. The girls quickly gathered around Shizuya, praising him as if he had been the one to defeat the villain. Seeing that, Stella grew irritated, and Shizuku quietly agreed with her. Ikki approached Shizuya to thank him, saying that thanks to him, everyone was safe. Shizuya responded that it was only natural to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, but then asked Ikki if he still planned to become a knight with such limited strength. Stella immediately grew defensive and demanded Shizuya stop talking that way, but Ikki gently held her back. Frustrated, Stella declared that Ikki was stronger than Shizuya. Shizuya laughed at her words, finding them amusing, and teased her by saying it seemed she already saw Ikki as a cool and admirable guy. He went on to remark that Ikki should have told her the truth, that he had once withdrawn from a match because he was unwilling to face him. Shizuya then told Ikki to check his email, revealing that he was Ikki's first opponent in the upcoming tournament. With pride, Shizuya introduced himself as last year's representative of the Seven Stars Festival and said he hoped Ikki wouldn't back out this time. Stella grew even more annoyed by his arrogance. The selection tournament for the Seven Stars Festival began with Stella facing a student nicknamed the Heavy Tank, whose name was Momotani. Momotani used a device shaped like armor called Goliath, and his signature move was Heavy Charge. The students cheered loudly when the match started, encouraging Momotani to defeat Stella. Stella reminded everyone that this was a real match, not just training, and warned Momotani that taking a direct hit here would hurt much more than during practice. She advised him to think carefully before fighting. After hearing her warning, Momotani decided to surrender, which made Stella the winner. After her match, Stella went to take a shower, where she overheard Shizuku and Nagi talking. Shizuku mentioned that there was nothing impressive about Stella's earlier match because her opponent had simply been too weak. When Stella came out of the bathroom, she admitted that Shizuku was right. It turned out that not only Stella but also Shizuku and Nagi had won their respective matches. Suddenly, Kagami appeared, praising them for their victories. Kagami's sudden entrance startled Stella, causing her towel to slip. Embarrassed, Stella tried to cover herself with her hands. Curious, Nagi asked who Kagami was. Kagami introduced herself as a member of the newspaper club and said she aspired to be a professional journalist. Nagi guessed that Kagami probably heard a lot of rumors around the academy. Shizuku clarified that Kagami was a journalist, not a gossip chaser, though she admitted that she often picked up on rumors as well. Nagi, instead of being put off, wanted to get along with her since they both enjoyed hearing such things. Meanwhile, Ikki was watching match footage on his laptop when Stella came over to see him. He congratulated her on her victory earlier, having already heard the result through an email. Stella noticed that Ikki had been rewatching the same video repeatedly and wondered why. Ikki explained that he wanted to study the timing of the attacks. Stella revealed that the move in question used an ability called the Invisible Area. It did not only hide a person's form, but also their scent and presence, making it a perfect camouflage. That was the frightening ability of the device Oborozuki. Stella admitted she disliked the idea of defeating opponents without ever revealing oneself. Ikki believed that if the user of Oborozuki ever faced Stella, he would likely back off immediately, since a long-range fighter like her could counter such an ability. He pointed out that while people called that kind of fighting style the hunter, Stella thought it was more fitting to call such a person a coward. She realized, however, that for Ikki, such an opponent would be especially challenging. She asked if he would really be alright going up against someone with a device like that. Ikki asked if she was worried about him. Stella, flustered, denied it, saying only that she did not want him to lose to someone like that. Ikki assured her that he already had a plan in mind and was confident in his victory. Stella smiled and encouraged him. Determined to figure out a way to defeat Shizuya, Ikki continued to train. While exercising, he ran into Nagi, who asked if it was true that Ikki had been attacked by Shizuya in the previous year. Ikki explained that back then, the Kurogang family had close ties with the former principal, and they kept trying to push him out of the academy. Because of that, Shizuya began targeting him. At that time, Ikki was banned from attending classes since his ability scores were ranked too low. Shizuya had challenged him to a fight, thinking that if Ikki could hold his own, the teachers would be forced to acknowledge his strength. However, Ikki refused because he had no intention of fighting him. Shizuya continued attacking him relentlessly, but Ikki never fought back. If Ikki had activated Intetsu, it would have meant he had taken the provocation, and even dodging might have been seen as resisting. Instead, he chose to stand still without fighting back, and because of that, he avoided punishment. Nagi then asked what Ikki would do if things did not change this year. Ikki said he would keep working to prove himself even if it took years of repeating the same efforts. Nagi commented that such strength could be called endurance, the ability to carry burdens within the heart. He explained that normally when endurance reached its limit, the heart would scream. But Ikki seemed unable to hear those cries anymore, which was why he could remain calm and keep smiling. Nagi hoped that someday someone would be able to hear the silent cries of Ikki's heart. Before his next match, Stella invited Ikki to watch another battle with her, but he declined, saying he needed to head to the waiting room and focus on his own match. Shizuku noticed that his shoelaces were still untied and reminded him to fix them, while Nagi wished him luck and told him to be careful. At the tournament registration, Nene appeared and praised him. She explained that most high school students usually use imitation devices, which was why many of them withdrew from the selection tournament once they realized it followed official match rules, where the stakes were serious. Ikki said he had been waiting for the chance to compete in an official match, so he felt no hesitation. Nene was impressed, and Ikki recognized her immediately. Every student knew that Nene was the demon princess of the KOK Top League. He also knew she was an old friend of Kurono's and had returned as a part-time instructor that year. Nene leaned casually against him and playfully suggested the idea of a private lesson together later that night. Suddenly, Kurono approached Nene, catching her off guard. She instinctively hid behind Ikki. Kurono questioned why Nene, who was supposed to serve as the commentator and overseer for the third match, was lingering there. Nene admitted that she was bored with the previous match, and Kurono promptly pulled her back to her designated spot. 30 minutes before Ikki's match, he focused intently on preparing himself. He could hardly believe that he had finally reached his first official match. Years of patience and perseverance had led him to this moment. Confident that he would not lose, he waited for the time to arrive. When the 30 minutes had passed, it was finally Ikki's turn to step into the arena. This was the fourth match of the day, and Hangetsu and Nene were in charge of guiding the proceedings. The students were buzzing with excitement, eagerly anticipating the battle. The first contestant to appear was Shizuya, a student from Class C who had previously represented his class in the Seven Stars Festival during first grade. The crowd erupted in cheers at his arrival. Opposing him was Ikki, a Class F student who had recently defeated Stella in a practice duel. Shizuya arrogantly expressed disbelief that Eke had dared to show up for this match, claiming he would easily crush him. Without hesitation, Shizuya activated his Oborozuki device, manifesting as a bow, while Ikki readied his Intetsu device in the form of a sword. Ikki concentrated fully, but Shizuya mocked the intensity of his gaze. Despite being reminded that the match had officially begun, Shizuya continued taunting him for appearing impatient. Then, Shizuya activated the invisible area, causing both of them to vanish from sight. The arena now resembled a dense forest, with the environment itself adding to the challenge. 04. As arrows flew from every direction, Ikki managed to deflect them. Suddenly, he noticed a rip in the air and realized that he had located Shizuya. With a swift strike of his sword, he landed a successful hit. The invisible area could not conceal the physical trajectory of Shizuya's arrows, and Ikki followed the paths they left behind. The chase led them up into the trees. Shizuya could not believe that Ikki was serious about defeating him, while Ikki remained determined to prevail. Shizuya laughed at Ikki's resolve. Ikki prepared to accept Shizuya's attacks, confident he could block them. Shizuya then disappeared and began launching invisible strikes. Ikki could not avoid these attacks initially and wondered how Shizuya was able to execute them. Shizuya explained that he did not rely on cowardly shortcuts. This year, the invisible area could fully conceal the arrows until they struck the target. One arrow hit Ikki, causing him to stumble. Hangetsu was shocked by Shizuya's strength, clearly surpassing last year. Nagi grew increasingly concerned, and Shizuku noted that Ikki's plan might be in jeopardy. Stella questioned why Ikki had not used his techniques immediately. Knowing that this would be the ideal moment, Shizuku observed that Ikki's fighting style focused on analyzing the opponent, though Sato criticized it as a waste of time. Nagi, however, reasoned that Ikki was not careless but simply too nervous to seize the opportunity. Stella found this hard to believe, yet she acknowledged Ikki's rare display of confidence, as he had never declared certainty in victory before. Facing a barrage of arrows, Ikki continued to endure. Stella finally understood what Eke had been experiencing all along, despite being the person closest to him. Shizuya called for Ikki to engage fully, mocking him and claiming that the headmaster's decisions were too heavy for someone like him. The students were taken aback by his words. Shizuya then declared that if Ikki could win the Seven Stars Festival, he could graduate, prompting laughter from the audience. Shizuya continued taunting Ikki, and the students remembered the previous match against Stella, convinced that no Class F student could ever triumph over a Class A opponent. Despite not participating in the fight themselves, the spectators laughed at the challenge Ikki faced. Shizuya's arrows struck Ikki repeatedly, leaving him exhausted. Seeing this, Stella shouted for the students to stop mocking him, defending the young swordsman she admired. She encouraged Ikki not to give up, expressing that she preferred to see him fight with determination and wanted him to appear strong in her eyes. Inspired by her support, Ikki stood up and clenched his fists, silently thanking Stella for her encouragement. Shizuya, noticing Ikki's reaction to the female cheers, laughed at him. Ikki took a deep breath to regain focus, perplexed at his fixation on tracking Shizuya's arrows. Shizuya planned to target Ikki's mind while he was in a state of happiness. Ikki, however, had anticipated this and knew that he had one thing he could rely on, Itoshura. He activated the technique, but to Shizuya it seemed like a flawed move that could not compare to his own skill. Ikki's ability allowed him to observe an opponent's techniques and attacks in detail, paying attention to angles, words, and even the tone of voice when Shizuya released an arrow. By doing this, Ikki managed to anticipate Shizuya's arrow attack, leaving Shizuya genuinely surprised. Ikki had expected that Shizuya would change his target, and the sudden shift caused Shizuya to panic, thinking that Ikki could see him. While Ikki could not perceive Shizuya's physical form or shadow directly, he could infer his movements by analyzing Shizuya's attack style, the depth of his strikes, his emotions, and his tone of voice. Following these cues, Ikki could track Shizuya and ensure that he would not escape. Nene laughed at the scene, while Hangetsu asked how Ikki was able to track Shizuya so accurately. Nene explained that Ikki possessed the ability called Blade Steel, which allowed him to understand how an opponent's techniques worked. At that moment, Ikki was essentially reading Shizuya's strategy. The technique he used was called Perfect Vision. Ikki unleashed the full extent of his power against Shizuya, moving with unstoppable momentum. Even when Shizuya unleashed his Million Rain attack, Ikki continued to advance steadily. Shizuya grew increasingly fearful, to the point of pleading with Ikki not to harm him. Ikki's sword strike landed just inches from Shizuya's face, and he admitted that he might need to train more since his strike had missed by only a millimeter. Shizuya then collapsed, unable to continue the match, and Ikki was declared the winner. Hangetsu announced that Eke had officially won his first match, prompting cheers from the audience. Eke glanced at Stella before suddenly fainting. Hangetsu immediately instructed the medical team to take Ikki to the student infirmary. Nene had already suspected that the selection process at that stage could not be overlooked. That night, Ikki woke up to find Stella sleeping nearby. At the same time, Shizuku stood quietly by the door of the infirmary. Nagi asked why she did not come inside. Shizuku remained silent and immediately embraced Nagi. Nagi admitted that he liked Shizuku's personality. Soon after, Stella woke up and felt embarrassed, lightly hitting Ikki because he had seen her sleeping while drooling. Ikki apologized for causing her concern. He confessed that he also had feelings for Stella and felt grateful to have met her. Stella became flustered, realizing that while she admired Ikki, her admiration was more for his courage and determination rather than romantic feelings. Ikki understood this, yet admitted that he had wanted to express his feelings. Stella called him straightforward, noting that only Ikki could be so honest. She asked him to close his eyes and then gently kissed his cheek. Stella reassured him not to misunderstand her actions, explaining that she had genuinely wanted to do it. She admitted that her feelings in that moment matched Ikki's, and he hugged her tightly. Stella smiled brightly and told him that this moment was meant to be the only time it would happen. Ikki confessed that being with Stella made him feel stronger and more determined. He invited her to aim for the pinnacle of their skills together, which meant that in the final match he would face Stella. Stella felt confident that this time she would be the one to win. That day, Stella was training alone, still thinking about Ikki ever since that night when they hugged. Since then, they had become a couple, but Stella found it puzzling that for the past 2 weeks, Ikki had been acting completely normal toward her. Ikki had just won the selection tournament again, marking his 5th consecutive victory. His friends no longer called him the worst one and had started to see him as a skilled swordsman. Kagami even approached him, asking if he could practice sword techniques with her. Stella watched the interaction with a visibly annoyed expression. Ikki didn't mind helping Kagami and the others, which made them all very happy. Kagami began taking notes for her next front-page article about the warm guidance she received from Ikki. Ikki wondered why their training sessions seemed to shift in focus, but Kagami said it was fine and decided to start her practice the following day. Stella appeared frustrated, noticing how the male students looked envious of Ikki being surrounded by girls. Before long, Yuri arrived to begin their class, but unexpectedly, she collapsed and became unconscious, causing panic among the students. Later in the room, Stella questioned why Ikki was so brave. She was concerned because Kagami and her friends were skilled fighters, so training them could turn them into challenging opponents for Ikki. However, Ikki hoped for that outcome, believing that if it happened, it would show Kagami and the others were truly deserving of training. Besides, if they faced difficult situations, Ikki's advice might help them. He simply wanted to do whatever he could. Stella realized just how kind-hearted Ikki really was. Ikki admitted it, and Stella, feeling shy, reminded him that they had been dating for 2 weeks and maybe it was time to do the usual couple activities. Unfortunately, Ikki didn't hear her because he had already fallen into a deep sleep, leaving Stella feeling quite frustrated. The next day, Ikki began training Kagami and her friends. He asked them to stand on one leg. Kagami asked about the purpose of the exercise. Ikki explained that it was meant to help them learn to use their inner muscles and understand the importance of balance, especially in combat where one often relies on a single leg. He also mentioned that in Chinese martial arts, putting weight on both legs equally is considered a mistake called double pressure stance. Kagami took detailed notes, learning new information from Ikki. Suddenly, a few male students approached. They were annoyed by Ikki's confident attitude and the fact that he was surrounded by girls. They activated their devices without Ikki realizing who they were. Kagami asked what they intended to do. They wanted to teach Ikki a lesson and tried to surround him, but Ikki skillfully handled the situation quickly and efficiently, neutralizing the threat. One student, scared, attempted to use a device, but Ikki easily stopped it. He approached the student, who became so frightened that a simple tap from Ikki caused him to kneel. Ikki reminded everyone that using devices on school grounds without permission was forbidden. Unexpectedly, the students apologized to Ikki. Kagami was surprised by their attitude. They admitted that they were simply jealous because Ikki was strong and popular among the girls. They also wanted to become strong and respected like him. They begged Ikki to train them, and he agreed, immediately instructing them to start practicing right away. The male students even began calling him Master Teacher. Kagami kept taking notes about Ikki's teaching methods, confident that her story would attract attention online. Soon, the female students also joined the training and Ikki allowed them to participate. The group kept growing and Kagami enjoyed taking pictures for her article. Ikki realized that everyone had their own skills and learning even a little sword technique could add variety to their fighting styles. Stella had prepared a sports drink for Ikki, but Shizuku beat her to it, grabbing his hand and giving him the drink. Ikki drank it, while Shizuku excitedly joked about the flavor. Both Stella and Ikki were startled, but it turned out Shizuku was just teasing. She asked why Stella brought 2 bottles, and Stella admitted she was very thirsty and wanted both. Unexpectedly, Stella drank them herself before Ikki could stop her. Shizuku decided to join Ikki's training. Even though she had a trainer at home, she claimed she wouldn't want to train under someone who had previously rejected Ikki. Ake permitted her to join. Stella didn't want to be left out and tried to join as well, but Ikki didn't immediately allow it. Frustrated, Stella ran off, upset that Ikki wasn't being sensitive to her feelings. On her way, she ran into Nagi, who had a dating game called Shiritsu Prince Kakuan, which Stella borrowed out of curiosity. She played it in her room, enjoying the romantic interactions and imagining moments like holding hands, sharing a kiss, and hugging. Suddenly, Ikki appeared, startling Stella. He told her that tomorrow's training session would be held at the swimming pool and invited her to join. Stella questioned why he was inviting her when he hadn't intended to train her before, and Ikki explained the reason. The next day, Ikki, Stella, and the others set off on the bus. Stella looked cheerful, sitting next to Ikki. Shizuku wondered why Stella was joining them, while Nagi guessed that Stella must have been so hooked on Shirapu's game that she was ignoring the real world. Stella smiled, remembering what Ikki had said yesterday. She realized that she had already reached the point where Ikki could train her, even though their sword styles were very different. Aki's technique relied more on strategy, while Stella relied on raw strength. If she practiced with Ikki, the results could be unpredictable. Ikki wanted Stella to grow far beyond what she imagined. Her eyes sparkled as she felt moved by his concern. Stella watched Ikki's peaceful sleeping face on the bus, and Kagami noticed the quiet moment between them. When they arrived at the swimming pool, the students changed into their swimsuits, looking impressive in their new attire. It was Stella's first time seeing a swimming pool in Japan. Shizuku teased her, joking that a foreign princess had never experienced the outside world. Stella explained that in her palace, pools of that size were usually only for bathing. The two of them always seemed to bicker, no matter where they were. The boys watched with admiration, feeling lucky to follow in the footsteps of their great teacher. Ikki instructed them to relax their bodies and float in the water. This exercise was meant to train their lung capacity. Kagami continued taking notes on everything Ikki said. While in the water, they would become more in tune with themselves. Ikki asked them to focus on their bodies and listen to the inner voice within. Stella seemed slightly bored because Ikki wasn't spending much time with her, even though she had gone through the trouble of picking out her swimsuit. At one point, she accidentally dropped a ball, which hit another girl. Stella apologized, but the girl barely paid attention. Stella dove into the pool, following Ikki's instructions, trying to listen to her heart to determine which sense was her strongest. She was confident that Ikki's Ito Shura technique would sharpen that sense to its limit. As she focused underwater, she was startled when Kagami asked about her relationship with Ikki. Stella choked and quickly surfaced. Kagami immediately apologized, and Stella asked what she meant by that question. Stella tried to brush off the topic, thinking it impossible for a princess to date a commoner. Kagami then asked if that meant she could pursue a relationship with Ikki herself, even jokingly suggesting she would confess to him. Hearing this, Stella quickly stopped her, accidentally admitting that Ikki was her boyfriend. Kagami promised not to tell anyone, reasoning that as a journalist, she also wanted her friendships to remain smooth. Stella felt relieved, but Kagami pressed on, asking how far her relationship with Ikki had progressed. Stella's face turned red at the question. Kagami curiously wondered if they had done anything intimate, but Stella firmly denied it. Kagami speculated whether they had at least kissed, and Stella bashfully admitted that they had not. Ikki was still training the students, and Shizuku was surprised to see that he remained so enthusiastic. She asked Nagi whether it was strange for a younger sister to have feelings for her older brother. According to Nagi, while it was unusual in general, he believed that Shizuku would continue to like Ikki regardless, and that this was a form of true affection. Meanwhile, Stella was sharing her feelings with Kagami, who realized that Stella was deeply devoted to Ikki. Stella admired everything about him, from his life path to his dreams. Kagami was curious whether there had been any progress in Ikki and Stella's relationship over the past 2 weeks. Stella admitted that she did not want to force anything, she simply wanted them to appear more like a couple. Kagami asked if Stella had told Ikki about this, but Stella felt she could not bring herself to say it, as she was shy. At that moment, Nagi tried to comfort Shizuku, who was feeling conflicted. He was confident that no man would dislike a determined girl, especially one as sweet as Shizuku. She realized that she needed to be ready for either outcome, whether Ikki would accept her or not. Nagi explained that this was a step in transforming from a little sister into a mature woman. Shizuku responded that as long as Ikki was happy, she would be happy too. Nagi reminded her that she still had a chance, especially since Stella had not yet fully opened up to Ikki. At the same time, Kagami suggested that Stella should be more open with Ikki. If she remained silent, Ikki might not open up either. Stella was worried that being too forward might make Ikki dislike her, fearing she would seem inappropriate. Kagami reassured her that Ikki would not dislike her, explaining that 2 weeks was a long time and men often acted slowly. If Stella kept quiet, he might eventually drift away. Stella did not want that to happen. Kagami promised to help them get closer and mentioned that she had noticed Ikki glancing at Stella's swimsuit. Stella felt a surge of excitement, but immediately became nervous when Kagami left to call Ikki. Before long, Ikki approached Stella. He mentioned that Kagami had told him she wanted to discuss something important. Stella asked what he thought of her swimsuit. Akai said it suited her well, but Stella felt a bit down since he had not looked directly at her. She remembered Kagami's advice not to remain silent. Suddenly, Ikki asked if they were sure about continuing their relationship as it was. He also noted that in the past 2 weeks they had not really seemed like a couple. Stella feared that he might leave her, but Ikki explained that he simply wanted to discuss the future of their relationship. Overwhelmed, Stella began to cry, expressing that she felt their relationship was impossible. She also complained about how they had never held hands and noticed that Shizuku or even Kagami at times seemed more attentive. Ikki was confused by what Stella was saying. She guessed that he might want to break up with her. Ikki apologized if his behavior had made her dislike him. Stella asked if it was not Ikki who disliked her, but he was puzzled by why she would think that. He turned it around, suggesting that she was the one upset with him. Though Stella denied this and affirmed her feelings for him, Ikki admitted that he liked her even more. Stella was frustrated by Ikki's indifferent reaction to her swimsuit and his lack of attention when she went silent. Ikki explained that he did not want to focus on her swimsuit because he did not want her to think he was being inappropriate. It turned out that both of them were concerned about being misunderstood, so they avoided behaviors that couples might usually share. They did not even understand why they had argued in the first place. Ikki had asked Stella to express what she wanted to do at that moment. To their surprise, they both wanted to kiss. Facing each other, Ikki gently kissed Stella on the lips. Stella asked if he disliked girls who took the initiative to kiss, but Ikki assured her that no man would dislike a confident girl. Stella confessed that she did not like guys who initiated kisses, except for Ikki. Afterward, they shared a tender moment together. On the bus, Stella and Ikki held hands. Suddenly, they received an email notification that their next matches were scheduled. Ikki would face Renren, while Stella would face Ikazuchi. Surprisingly, their opponents were members of the student council.